This is Damo's Recovery Session. When you need a tool, call Coates Hire on 13 15 52.
Ah, yes, the Caper's number one newsbreaker. Welcome, Purple.
Hello, Jim and Bill, and a little bit going on in the world
God.
of AFL, isn't it?
Well,
we couldn't even get through a second round of return matches without all hell breaking loose yet again.
I play golf on a Monday with a very, very passionate Essendon fan. We got to the first tee, and as he was putting his tee peg down, he said, I can't believe an act of God's cost us the premiership.
Oh, fair.
I said to him, mate, your joints buggered our comp again.
Well, you could easily just say, Essendon. Couldn't you, Damo? Look at Damo.
Look at Pat Bill.
Well, you could, Jim, because fair dinkum. I know it's not their fault, kind of, but every time there's something, Damo.
Do you know you realise what you just said?
Yeah. Damo. Look at that. But honestly, every time it's bloody Essendon.
Where are we at with it, Purple?
Look, it's a mess. It's going to require a change, not just at Essendon, but every club in terms of how the training sessions are structured. There'll be even stricter guidelines on what people can do together on a group. There's going to be a restriction in tackling allowances at training. So all of this obviously impacts on the game itself because we've already seen some scratchy skills, haven't we, in the return games?
Yep,
and rusty is probably the better word to even use, Bill. So this will be an outcome of it. In terms of the Essendon situation, it moves in half-hour blocks, Jim.
Yeah,
So
right.
what we're about to say now could well be very different. But the game against Carlton on the weekend, look, according to the AFL, and as best I can read it, it will go ahead provided Essendon has 22 players to put on the ground and a backup of 3 players. And if that means that that's all they've got, well, that game will go ahead. But that's the way the AFL has been treating
So
it. Now,
the common sense clause that they were hoping would be implemented, by the sound of it, isn't going to be.
Well, again, Essendon has got a different view on that aspect of it. And again, things will change beyond what we're saying right now at this very point in time. And the best case for it is, and the AFL's been arguing heavily all day about this, is for only to be Conor McKenna, who is the person quarantined by the DHHS here in Victoria, the Department of Health and Human Services, and they will be the body that determines exactly what happens from an availability perspective. The AFL is allowed to negotiate behind the scenes and lean on them, and there's wiggle room, Jim, in the definition of close contact, and the AFL likes wiggle room, as we know. It's an allowance bill to use a different definition to someone else that they may have over that. So
this 8 they're talking about, which is McKenna, Hooker, Sard,
I wouldn't limit it to those.
Redmond.
There could be more than that 8. Yeah.
But the 8 they're talking about, that's the indoor training weight session group?
That's and there's also a meeting around this issue too and around this time frame as well. It's not limited to those 8 people that you've probably been reading about.
Because you wouldn't have your whole back line in one hub, training together, because a lot of clubs they've split them up, haven't they?
Yeah, and the AFL the AFL gets criticised regularly. We criticise them regularly, don't we? But what they've done when it came to telling the clubs and advising the clubs on the protocols, Bill, was to mix up those groups for this very
2 stars,
reason.
2 maybes, and
2
then
rookies,
2 rookies,
2 forwards or 2 wingmen. So that you didn't lose potentially a whole group. Now, that may not be the case with Essendon anyway, how this plays out, but they do appear at the very outset to have gone against what the AFL suggested they do in those group situations.
People listening to this will be saying, why can't we just test all of the remaining players on the Essendon list? If it takes 48 hours to get those tests back, we've got 48 hours. Yeah. If they come back and they're all fine, get rid of McKenna. Well, not get rid of him, but make sure McKenna's out of the situation and play the game against Carlton. Why is that too simplistic?
No, it's not. And that's exactly what the AFL and Essendon have been arguing all day today. And from a very early starting point of the day itself. The tests to which you referred, Jim, as far as I know, they've now been had en masse, player and officials at that footy club. And that was scheduled for today. We're going to get those results, or the club will get those results, if not already now, by first thing tomorrow. And that may be part of the overall considerations around what happens next.
Has Conor broken the rules?
He's broken the protocols, Bill, through visiting a house inspection, is the way I read it. Now, I feel for him a little bit. I mean, he's obviously in a situation where he needs to find new accommodation. But it is specifically referenced in a 53 or 57-page document given to the players about house inspections. Now, it even says, the way I've been told it anyway, that you can go to a house inspection provided you get a special clearance from your COVID-19 officer in charge of you.
So every club has a COVID officer. And I rang Oscar on the way up just to make sure. And it's a bloke at the club that's been there for a long time.
Bill at the club.
Yeah, and he's been, and I said to Oscar, if you were looking at a house, what would you do? And he'd say, you'd probably just ring him and say, can we do this?
I'm yet to be told officially that he didn't get that special dispensation, but I don't think he did, Bill. And that's one thing. Look, there's a visitation to, I believe, the host family. but in his world, that host family is his mum and dad or his parents in his life. And he's an Irish kid who was looked after by this family. So I feel for him there too. I've not heard one thing that he's done that to me gives anyone cause for anger about the breaches. Yes, he shouldn't have done what he did because he's put the whole competition potentially in jeopardy, but he's a young kid.
It's not a howler. He hasn't gone to a nightclub.
It's not a Lockie Hunter running into 4 cars and leaving the scene. It's not that.
Hey, should the AFL send every Victorian team to a hub in South Australia, Queensland or WA? Because of the virus numbers here.
To balance it. Again, there's going to be issues.
Hotspot, Victoria.
And Bill, there's going to be issues from those states you referenced there about allowing Victorians into them.
Special.
Richmond has to fly to the Southeast Queensland hub to play West Coast, not this weekend, the weekend after.
Yeah.
I reckon it's a watch this space potentially on what that government does on this because of the numbers that are continually rising here in Victoria.
All right, I feel for Melbourne, by the way.
I do too.
They are
done nothing wrong.
Done zero wrong, and their season's also been thrown into chaos a bit.
As I said at the start, Jim.
Oh, Bill, we're going to take a break because there's lots of footy to discuss with Damo.
So Rush Hour, Triple M. Triple M's Rush Hour, JB Bill, and Damien Barrett for Coates Hire is in the studio chatting round 3.
We're going to get him to hang around for another segment.
You've got some material.
I have, and it affects 2 people in this room, and it's not me or Rabs, which I like.
All right, is it? Okay, well, we'll hang on to that. But Purple, we'll start with the positives.
Yeah, we will, and I think we need to go to an unusual place when it comes to that word in this club, the Gold Coast Suns. They are the boom story, aren't they, of the footy returning. Big win last week against West Coast, a bigger win this week against Adelaide, and they did it on the back of a couple of themes. One being the young kid in Matty Rowell, who's possibly, Bill, picked up 6 Brownlow votes in those 2 games he's had since the game was shut down. And Ben King is just looking like the player that he was always meant to be. They're doing it with a style that's compelling to watch. There's a genuine spark about it. It seems we've had false dawns with that club for so many times. They've been 2-1 quite a few times at the start of the season. Last year they were 2-1, and the one game they lost I think was by a point or a couple of points. So this just seems very, very different.
You know what I like? Stewie Jew.
Yeah.
Good on you. He deserves the credit he's due.
Thank you, Bill.
He does. He's hung in there. He's copped it left, right, and centre.
Yeah. And we
I'd
all
love
like
to
him.
hug him if I could.
He's a beauty.
Lost the last 18 games of last year, the first one of this year, but bounced back really strongly. And they're doing it, Jim, with third quarters, the old-fashioned premiership quarter. 5 goals against West Coast last week, 5 goals against Adelaide this week. I like them. I like them a lot.
All right, good. Port Adelaide, you can't help but admire as well.
You can't. And for those who haven't caught up with the ladder, the only undefeated... Actually, no, the only team to not lose. I say that because Collingwood is still undefeated, given they've got a draw in amongst their 3 games. But sitting atop the ladder, there still might be some question marks over the opponents they've beaten. But at the same time, they're 3-0.
Let me tell you, every opponent's hard at the minute.
It does seem to be, doesn't it?
After last weekend's results.
It does. So... Oh, look, they've now got a theme going, haven't they? Their forward line is very good with Charlie Dixon standing up, and you still have your heart in your mouth when you see him land on the ground, and you worry about those ankles he's got problems with, but he's good. Todd Marshall, again, just doing enough in that other key position role. We know what Robbie Gray does up there, and they're young kids. The only setback they've got was Xavier Duursma pinging the hamstring, and that seemed a nasty one, didn't it? But
what about the old
as good as he is, he's not going to be someone that's going to mean they can't win a premiership if it all goes well.
Travis Boak's just
really good.
Flying, isn't
he,
Boakey?
Very well.
We'll move on. We'll give another wrap to Carlton too, because we've constantly ridden
What
them.
happened there, Fat?
Will?
What the hell's that?
Well, I
You had a
turned it on.
bloody stiffy your cat couldn't scratch because all your home games were handed down to GMHBA, and Fat's going, well, we won't lose down
No,
there.
I didn't say that,
And then
Jim.
you get
did.
the Blues
I
bowl you
turned it
over.
on at 3/4
You
time.
said the
and
lights are on. Look how pretty they are.
No, exactly. They didn't turn up the 3/4 time. They weren't there. And Carlton were magnificent. They sliced through Geelong, the defence, the middle. They were very, very good. Geez, they played some good footy. So well done to Carlton. They fully deserved. And then the Cats come back and you think, oh, they're not going to pinch it, are they? They're not going to. Even then they stuffed. They had blokes running into each other. They got injuries. They just had everything went wrong. But well done, Carlton.
They had a plan too, and David Teague has spoken about this post-match about isolating the three talls in Stewart, Taylor,
Casbolt.
And they were able to just keep them away, Jim, because ultimately they went into it with the plan to not allow them to converge on the same ball.
Yeah.
And they kept it open. Eddie Best played a crucial role, didn't he, in allowing that to happen too, just by providing an option. McGovern, I think after the torrid week he'd had with the public commentary around him, did enough. His disposal was good. His efficiency was okay. So I liked it. And I think it's good for a club to be able to bounce back. They'd had a bad start again, which wasn't all that unusual. But I love a team that responds. And even if they'd lost that game, I liked the way they broke away, which was different. Tough to win down there.
It is.
And Pitnet was you can't say revelation yet because the body of work needs to be greater and longer than what it is at the moment. But there's a sign there that makes you think that's going to work. That's going to work.
Well done. Who else? Positive?
Well, just quickly go with Collingwood because they're just doing everything right. I know they had that draw against Richmond, but that was against last year's Premier, and you take a draw, so probably in that regard. So Stevenson coming back in just provides that dynamic that it didn't have, and I was surprised he was left out of both round 1 and 2. He was an emergency in both games, so he was thereabouts to be picked. And the Bulldogs, another one, Jim, they got their team right, didn't they? The two guys they brought into the middle in McLean and Liberatore had an immediate impact, a first quarter impact that continued for the game, and they just structured up better. And what I liked about what they did against GWS, Jim, was they just absorbed that off the ball and messy aggression and just dealt with the footy, didn't they? They got involved when they had to because they had to get involved, but they never
controlled that game almost from the start.
They did.
All right, negatives?
The negatives are obviously the Crows, and you asked the question last week, Bill, and you then got Jim into trouble by opening it up.
Landed me right in it.
Well, I'll ask you again, Jim. The Crows at rock bottom.
Landed me right in it, Fat
Jim. There's a lot of players who left the Crows over the last.
Well, what about
Why
him?
they left,
No
Jim?
worries. Look at you. They are in strife, though. Yesterday was horrible.
Terrible.
Yeah, it was.
horrible.
But to your point, though, Bill, and I think it was a really good question. Were they at the lowest ebb? You probably heard it from someone else on another meeting.
No,
But you raised it here last week on this very.
I think you heard it first.
Well, I heard it from you first. It is a good question, given they started in 1991. They've never been lower. They've never been lower because there's nothing good around the corner.
Not competitive.
They're just not. And you feel for Matty Nicks. You go back to round 1, which is a long time ago, back in March. They were beaten by the Swans, but they came home late and nearly stole it. You couldn't have seen then what was going to be dished up in the showdown last week on resumption, and then even worse, what they dished up against the Suns on the weekend.
And I said to Damo on a separate conversation, Fat, I know he's not where he wants to be and where he was, the Texan, but try playing ahead of the ball in that team.
Yeah.
Some of the delivery inside forward 50 is the most despicable I've almost ever seen.
Terrible.
Yeah, horrific.
And slow and...
Ball either kicked straight to his opponent or on the ground 20 metres out in front, making it a foot race, which Tex ain't ever winning. No. So, people are quick to jump on him, but I think through the middle, they've got all sorts of problems.
You reckon Matty Nicks, he'd be going, what have I got myself into?
What? Scared to raise this name after what happened last week, Jim, but Mark Rasciuto deciding to respond to Hugh Greenwood on social media.
Whackety whack.
Any idea why he would go down that public path again?
Idea.
I don't.
No idea.
West Coast needs to go into the negatives in a pretty big way. They're publicly bemoaning being in the hub. I've sort of taken the view that their case, they're entitled to have their case, but I don't think Adam Simpson should be the public face of that case. I think it needs to be a Trevor Nisbet who's the CEO.
Behind the scenes,
or even just make
arguing,
the point and get other people to sort of make your calls. But he's coming, you can't say it any other way, he's coming across as a sook. And I'm sorry, that's exactly the way he presented on a Friday before a game, which he was then unable to win for a second week in a row while they're in that Queensland hub. They lost to Gold Coast last week, Brisbane this week. It
goes through the team, Damo. When the coaches say it goes through, they run onto the ground, they look beaten from the bounce.
Yep.
Because it's all happened from the coach the night before.
And he's got a challenge now because Port Adelaide awaits them this weekend. Then they've got on the according to the fixturing anyway, Richmond the following week.
Up there, yeah.
There's every likelihood, no matter how much they complain, that they're going to have another week at least on the hub and quite possibly 2 before they even get to go home. And if they don't rectify it, Bill, their season is going to be over even before they get back to their home state.
Yeah.
I thought he handled the post-match presser well.
Yep.
That was fine, but you're right. The bit earlier it's something, probably leave that to Nizzy. But I'm a big Simo fan, as you know.
Yeah.
The other negative, excuse me, the other negative coming out of the weekend, North Melbourne, please.
Yeah, Jim.
You picked
did
it.
I say to you at 10:30 that they would lose that game of footy?
You said privately to me at 10:30 on the phone call, and then at 12:07 you raised it publicly, and it played out exactly the way you said it would. But they got ahead of themselves.
They're in the paper. They're not that good a side. Now, they played beautifully against GWS. Just keep ticking the boxes. Do the simple things, Bill.
Yep.
You know, they're not good enough to do anything but nice and simple. I reckon Reece would have split them right down the middle.
Well, they kicked the first 2 goals, Benny Brown, and I think they all thought, oh, here we go. Then they started lairising, and they weren't as hard.
Not good enough to do that.
No.
All right, well, now, you've got something next.
Oh, yeah, I've got a piece of documentation.
Oh, right. A documentation. Righto, that's coming up
Whatever
next.
that means, it's the rush hour on Triple M. It's the rush hour on Triple M for Coates Hire. Damien Barrett is in the studio, but Bill has a couple of people in his crosshairs.
A documentation.
I have.
Right.
Just tell me who signed that and what's the name at the bottom there. There. They are not you. There.
What am I? Oh, Mike Fitzpatrick.
Mike
Yes.
Fitzpatrick's our boss, okay?
Oh, yeah, yes, he is. Yes.
He's our boss. Okay.
Right.
I've been made aware of an incident that occurred out of hours on Saturday, June 13, that you may be able to shed some more light on. This is to you, Jim. Our promotions team have reported that a number of items went missing over the weekend from boxes that were delivered to our reception area.
Yeah, a thing of
Upon
favourites.
review of security camera, which I have here, come in, Ethan, and play it. You are seen opening a box at reception, Jim.
Yes, and taking out a thing of favourites.
Clearly marked with a sign stating they are not to be opened.
Fact.
Are we going through it now? These items were boxes.
Jim, you're coming into... Oh, that's me, actually.
That's you, Damo, so you're in it.
No, but I've walked past the boxes.
So, Jim.
Hang on, where's Jim?
Yeah, wait for it. Wait.
It's
So
still-
we're watching the video here. This is in reception that a box are clearly marked.
There
Do
it
not
is.
open.
Jim's on
Look,
screen.
here he comes. He's on screen. He's on camera. And opens up the box. Jim, you can't do
red-handed.
this. This is theft.
Jim, you're stealing something.
Look, this is theft. Here it is. Here he's chomping into the box.
Fat.
Yeah, you're well paid, as this letter says.
I walked back into the studio and said on air what I'd just done.
Yeah, he did say that.
You're
So
one of-
I actually owned up to it immediately and said, Onion, you're down a box of favourites.
the letter continues. You're one of the highest paid radio performers in Australia.
So I should be.
And I'm sure you can afford $17 for a couple of boxes of chocolates. So, yes, we're going to defer this to the police.
Fat.
I look forward to receiving your response, Mike
I
Fitzpatrick.
said to you and Damo and everyone else and our millions of listeners
Yeah.
that I had just stolen out of Onion's box
Yeah.
a thing of favourites. I declared it at the time.
He did, Bill.
All right, but you've eaten.
Oh,
The
you
said-
ate half the box.
When I was given that small chocolate bar, I wasn't aware it was a stolen property.
Stolen
You
goods,
fat
Damien,
ate
and
half the
you
box.
ate the said stolen good.
I ate one piece.
you had 10.
You had
No.
17.
There was Turkish delights left over.
They're always left over.
But what about that? You're on vision. You're on the
It's
camera.
scary,
you bloke.
actually, isn't it?
Damo, let me say this to you. And I'm not a racing man. You two know that. Even the Rabbits knows that. But this is a weird-ass season.
Yep.
We've got a Melbourne Cup field running over 1,500.
Yeah.
We don't know who's going to win.
No,
do
you're
we?
right.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's no bloody clock tower
No, there's
to
not.
work back.
The Emirates Stakes.
We've got no idea.
No,
These
we don't.
horses aren't prepared for this sort of racing.
And the wins along the way that even like a Sydney Swans
Yes.
have now managed to procure 2 out of the 3 that they've played. They're very important, more
Right.
important than ever.
We're at the minute. Who's going to win it? Who are the 2 teams in the grand final? Give me 2 teams.
You wouldn't do this even in a normal season after round 7,
No,
Bill,
I
which is
know,
probably
but
the equivalent.
Because it's up and down.
Look, I still can't see one thing wrong with Collingwood from a
Yes.
top 4 perspective.
All right. Who are they going to play?
Well, Port Adelaide are going as well as anyone.
All right.
So
At the minute,
Richmond will be there, of course.
If West Coast somehow beats Port Adelaide this weekend, Bill, they're back on track.
And give me the 2 worst sides.
Well,
Adelaide,
one's very,
yeah.
very obvious.
Adelaide, give me the next worst side. Because it's bloody hard.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you would have said Carlton until they finally got a win.
You wouldn't, but you'd say Freo, but they haven't been that bad.
No,
they
they've
weren't
been
great.
competitive. They were competitive in rounds 1 and 2,
weren't great on
and
the
just
weekend.
copped a hot team at the moment,
but
didn't they? Port Adelaide?
it's just so
And
hard.
Melbourne, we didn't see,
No.
but
Don't know, do we?
they will need to play better. We
Yeah.
buses.
Yeah, we're going to send one.
to Jim's house for pinching chocolates.
Yep.
Fair dinkum, Jim.
In fact, Onion, I could do with another box. Where is he?
That one we had at West Lakes last week is going to be joined by another one this week.
Oh, yeah,
we're
it's
going to
gonna
send
end up
another
a
one
depot.
across the way, Bill.
It could be a bus depot
We're
at
going to
West
have at
Lakes.
least 2, and if they keep dishing up that rubbish, we'll send another one next week as well.
Oh, wow.
Nice to see you, Purple. Thanks for dropping in.
Thanks, boys.
Damo's recovery session. When you need a tool, call Coates Hire on 13 15 52.
Bill's joke to wrap up another show next.